bravery. Then he turned the heat up.
Name, I'm sure you've seen it. Quote, I fired him and there was a great case, he wrote to you about, Mr. Siebert. Then we moved down. We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now. And obviously, you followed that order. Lindsay Halligan, Trump's former defense lawyer who had never prosecuted a case in her life, was installed to replace Mr. Siebert, and it was clear that part of her mandate was to go after Ms. James. Halligan immediately sought an indictment, which the court dismissed because Halligan was illegally put into the role. But your department was undeterred, and not once, but twice, it tried to indict Attorney General James in separate courts. Both grand juries rejected you and refused to indict her. It is practically unheard of for a grand jury to refuse an indictment. In 2016, it happened in just 6 cases out of over 150,000 offenses. And you had it happen twice in the same week, in 2 different courts. That must have been humiliating. And now there are reports you are continuing to investigate her. The amount of resources that have gone into targeting Attorney General James, months of investigations, multiple failed indictments, is astounding. Since your own prosecutors told you that there is not enough evidence to support a conviction, it's clear that you were going after her simply because she held President Trump accountable and he wants to punish her. And she is just one name on a long list of Trump political enemies that DOJ is reportedly targeting. From Jerome Powell and Lisa Cook at the Federal Reserve to James Comey, numerous Democratic members of Congress, John Brennan, Jack Smith, Democratic officials in Minnesota, Chris Krebs, Miles Taylors, and more. And those are just the ones we know about. In contrast to these politically motivated investigations, grasping at something they can charge their enemies with, we now have concrete evidence of disgusting criminality revealed in the Epstein files. So I really have just one question for you. How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating?
First, you showed it. I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
Your
you're going to answer the
theatrics are
question the
ridiculous.
way I asked it.
Chairman Jordan, I'm not going to get in the gutter with these people, but I'm going to answer the question.
How many have you indicted?
Again, the time belongs to
Reclaiming my time.
The time belongs.
I think it's very interesting.
Reclaiming my time.
I think it's very interesting.
And you can
that
reclaim
he
your
talks
time,
about
but
they indicted. The president said they indicted him twice.
Mr. Chairman, please stop the clock and restore his time.
Okay, here we go with these
Committee will be in order.
theatrics.
The time belongs to the gentleman from New York. We will give you a few more seconds. We will do that. But when you ask a question, the witness gets to answer. You may not like the answer, but she gets to answer.
The question was, how many of Epstein's...
They don't like the answer, Chairman,
my time.
because it's honest. So he asked a 4-minute question.
Restore 45 seconds, Mr. Nadler,
going
please,
to
Mr. Chairman.
Answer.
You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch. Not on our time. No way. And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me
Yeah,
anything.
I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Committee will be in order.
Time, and I should get back at least 45 seconds.
We will give you a few more seconds. I
Not
said
a
that
few more,
already.
45 seconds.
Okay, I'm timing right now, Mr. Nadler. Go
All
ahead.
right.
Reclaiming my time. The answer to my question, how many of Epstein's co-conspirators has she indicted, is 0. You have been the Attorney General for a whole year, and your DOJ fired the lead prosecutor of this case, sat on evidence this entire time, and claimed falsely last July that there were no more leads. It took an act of Congress for you to finally release part of the Epstein files, and when you did, you included personal information about the victims while protecting the names of abusers.
Time of the gentleman
None
has
of the perpetrators
expired.
have been brought to justice, but enormous resources
Time
have been
of the
dedicated
gentleman
to
has
pursuing Trump's
expired,
enemies.
and
It's
obviously
clear
there
that
was-
under your leadership, the Department of Justice
There
no
was
longer
no
works
question
for the
in
American
there.
people. It works
Order
for
respond
Donald
to.
Trump. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.
May I answer?
I think our next questioner, Madam Attorney General, is going to give you time to respond to
Thank you, Chairman.
all kinds of things. So we will turn to the gentleman from Texas for 5 minutes.
Ms. Bondi, you go right ahead. I'm over here. The time is yours.
Thank you. First, he brought up the president saying they indicted me twice. They sure did. They tried to impeach him twice. And you, Mr. Nadler, were one of the leads on the impeachment. I was on the other side. I lived that with you. During impeachment, you said the president conspired, sought foreign interference in the 2016 election. Robert Mueller found no evidence, none, of foreign interference in 2016. Have you apologized to President Trump? Have you apologized to President Trump, all of you who participated in those impeachment hearings against Donald Trump? You all should be apologizing. You sit here and you attack the president, and I am not going to have it. I'm not going to put up with it. You know, all they want to do, the American people need to know this. They are talking about Epstein today. This has been around since the Obama administration. This administration released over 3 million pages of documents, over 3 million, and Donald Trump signed that law to release all of those documents. He is the most transparent president in the nation's history. And none of them asked Merrick Garland over the last 4 years one word about Jeffrey Epstein. How ironic is that? You know why? Because Donald Trump, the Dow right now is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader, as I hear, Raskin. The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about making Americans safe. We should be talking about, what does a Dow have to do with anything? That's what they just asked. Are you kidding?
Mr. Jordan, Mr. Jordan.
Committee will be in order.
Mr. Jordan, am I going to get an extra 45 seconds added to my time?
The committee will be in order. The time belongs to the gentleman from Texas. Ms. Bondi, the Attorney General can respond.
Thank you. The Dow has shattered 50,000 for the first time. This is crazy. They said it couldn't be done in 4 years, yet President Trump has done it in 1 year. National median rents have fallen to a 4-year low, thanks to Donald Trump. That's why they want to focus on Epstein and our most transparent president in the nation's history. The murder rate, as I said, has plummeted to a 125-year low, thanks to Donald Trump. For an unprecedented 9 straight months, there were 0 illegal border crossings at the southern border. That's what we should be focused on. All the great work that this president has done and will continue to do to keep America safe and to make Americans safe.
Nadler said the Department of Justice under Attorney General Pam Bondi had failed those survivors. He pointed to the recent release of Epstein-related documents and claimed something that immediately grabbed attention. The department had left victims' names visible while blacking out the names of alleged abusers, whether that happened through incompetence or something deliberate. He called it completely unacceptable. He didn't stop there. Nadler argued that while the DOJ had poured resources into going after political targets, people he described as Donald Trump's perceived enemies, it had brought 0 new charges against Epstein's alleged co-conspirators. He zeroed in on one high-profile example, New York Attorney General Letitia James. According to Nadler, the DOJ had manufactured a mortgage fraud investigation against her after she pursued Trump's companies for years. A Trump-appointed U.S. attorney named Eric Siebert looked at the evidence and refused to bring charges. Then, Nadler said Siebert was forced out. Trump himself posted publicly about the firing and the need for action. Lindsay Halligan, Trump's former defense lawyer with no prior prosecutorial experience, was installed. An indictment followed. A court later dismissed it over the legality of her appointment. Grand juries in 2 different courts rejected further attempts. Nadler called those refusals practically unheard of and claimed the investigation was still continuing. He listed other names he said were on a longer list of targets: Federal Reserve officials, former intelligence figures, Democratic members of Congress, and more. Then came the core question. With all that activity on one side, how many of Epstein's co-conspirators have been indicted? How many were even under active investigation? Nadler pressed. Bondi tried to answer on her own terms. The back and forth grew heated. Time was reclaimed. Objections flew. When the dust settled enough for Nadler to finish, he declared the answer was 0. 1 full year as Attorney General, he said, and still nothing. The lead prosecutor on the case had been moved. Evidence had sat. A July claim of no more leads had been made. It took an act of Congress to force the partial release of the files. And even then, the redaction choices looked backwards to him. He yielded. But that wasn't the whole story of the day. The chairman gave Bondi time through another member, and she took it. She didn't dive straight into co-conspirator counts. Instead, she went back years. She reminded the room that Democrats had impeached Trump twice and that Nadler himself had been involved. She asked whether anyone had apologized after Robert Mueller found no evidence of the foreign interference conspiracy some had alleged in 2016. She said she wouldn't sit still for attacks on the president. Then she turned to Epstein directly. The case had been around since the Obama years, she noted. The current administration had released over 3 million pages. Trump had signed the law that forced the disclosure. She called him the most transparent president in the nation's history. And she pointed out something she found telling. None of these same critics had pressed Merrick Garland about Epstein during the previous 4 years. Why the sudden focus now? Bondi suggested the answer was political. She listed economic numbers. The Dow above 50,000 for the first time, the S&P near 7,000, NASDAQ records stronger 401(k)s, national median rents at a 4-year low. She cited a murder rate at a 125-year low and 9 straight months of 0 illegal crossings at the southern border. Those, she argued, were the real priorities. Focusing on Epstein was a distraction from results. The exchange ended without a clean numerical answer on indictments. That silence is what keeps pulling people back to the larger record. To understand why the question still stings, you have to go back further than one hearing. Epstein's crimes were not a secret by the time he was arrested in 2019 on federal sex trafficking charges. He had already pleaded guilty years earlier in Florida to soliciting prostitution from an underage girl. After the 2019 arrest, federal investigators looked beyond Epstein himself. Internal emails and memos later released show agents discussing contact with roughly 10 individuals they labeled co-conspirators. Some names surfaced clearly in the public documents. Ghislaine Maxwell, who was later convicted and sentenced to 20 years. French modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel, who died in custody in 2022 while facing his own charges. And retail billionaire Leslie Wexner, long linked to Epstein in public reporting. Other names stayed redacted. An 86-page prosecution memo from late 2019 examined whether associates and employees could face charges. Maxwell was the only one ultimately convicted in the federal sex trafficking conspiracy tied to Epstein. Survivors and their lawyers have said far more information existed. Nearly 50 survivors, according to counsel who spoke with House Democrats, provided detailed accounts to SDNY prosecutors and the FBI. Those accounts allegedly named at least 20 men who participated in the trafficking network, described how it was structured and financed, and identified facilitators. That investigation remained active into early 2025. Then the files were ordered transferred from the Southern District of New York to Justice Department headquarters in Washington. Survivors and the prosecutors on the ground were not told the transfer was meant to end the probe, according to later statements from Ranking Member Jamie Raskin and Survivors Council. By July 2025, the DOJ and FBI issued a joint memo. It stated that a thorough review had found no evidence that could support investigations against uncharged third parties and no incriminating client list. The case was effectively closed on that front. Attorney General Bondi had raised expectations months earlier. In a February 2025 television interview, she said the Epstein client list was sitting on her desk for review and that information would be released at President Trump's direction. When the first batches came out, they largely contained material already public. The July memo landed like a cold shower on parts of the base that had expected more. Criticism came from both sides. Conservatives who had pushed for full transparency felt shortchanged. Democrats accused the department of protecting powerful people. Congress responded. The Epstein Files Transparency Act passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. Trump signed it. The law set a tight deadline and limited the grounds for withholding or redacting material, primarily to protect victims, not reputations or political sensitivity. In late January 2026, the Justice Department began the major public release. More than 3 million pages, tens of thousands of images, and thousands of videos. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche described it as compliance with the law. Officials said roughly half the collected material was held back for reasons including victim privacy, child sexual abuse material, ongoing investigations, and certain privileges. What followed was immediate controversy. Attorneys for survivors reported that names and identifying details of victims, including some who had never been public, appeared unredacted in the posted files. In some cases, the same documents blacked out names of alleged associates or potential co-conspirators. Lawyers called it a betrayal and an emergency for the people whose privacy the law was supposed to safeguard. The department later removed some files after complaints and acknowledged errors in a production of that size under a compressed timeline. Critics, including members of Congress who had voted for the law, argued the redaction pattern looked selective. One example that drew notice: Leslie Wexner's name redacted in a memo that labeled him a co-conspirator, even though his association with Epstein was already widely reported. Bondi and department officials maintained that mistakes were minimal given the volume, and that the priority remained protecting victims while delivering maximum transparency. Bondi herself faced questions about her personal role. In later closed-door testimony, she stated that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche had been in charge of the process and the entire release. She deferred on certain documents to FBI Director Kash Patel. Current and former officials disputed the degree of distance she claimed. The July 2025 memo that closed the third-party review carried her department's authority. By the February 2026 public hearing, she was still defending the overall record while stating that pending investigations existed and urging any remaining victims to come forward to the FBI. That brings us back to the political contrast Nadler tried to draw. The Letitia James case became a flashpoint. After James's civil actions against Trump's businesses, federal authorities opened a mortgage fraud probe focused on a 2020 property purchase in Norfolk, Virginia. The allegation was that James had described the house as a secondary residence to obtain better loan terms, then used it as a rental. Prosecutors under the prior U.S. attorney examined the matter for months and declined to charge. After personnel changes, Halligan presented an indictment. A federal judge later ruled her interim appointment unlawful and dismissed the case. Subsequent grand juries declined to return new indictments. Separate referrals on other properties surfaced later. James called the entire effort political revenge. The department maintained it was following evidence of financial misconduct. Courts and grand juries repeatedly complicated the path forward. Similar patterns appeared in other high-profile matters involving former officials and political figures. Appointments challenged, cases dismissed or refused, resources questioned. Bondi's response in the hearing framed the entire Epstein focus as selective outrage. No one had pressed the previous administration with the same intensity, she said. The current one had produced millions of pages under a law the president signed. Meanwhile, the country was seeing record markets, lower rents, dramatically reduced murder rates, and a sealed southern border by the metrics she cited. Those results, in her view, deserved the attention. The theatrics around old files did not. Yet the files themselves keep generating new questions. Additional court orders in 2026 have pressed for further unredactions of certain emails and interview notes. Survivors continue to press for accountability beyond Maxwell. Lawmakers from both parties have expressed frustration with remaining gaps, missing categories of documents, unexplained redactions of public figures, and the abrupt end to the co-conspirator track in 2025. Bondi's tenure ended in April 2026 amid the broader political and personal pressures of the role. The documents remain online for anyone to search. The survivors who sat in that hearing room still wait for answers that go beyond pages and redactions. So where does that leave the original question? Public records show one major federal conviction tied to the trafficking conspiracy. Maxwell. Brunel is dead. Other names appear in the files with varying degrees of redaction or prior public association. Survivor counsel and some members of Congress continue to assert that detailed information on roughly 20 additional individuals was provided and then set aside. The department under Bondi stated it found no predicate for further charges after its review and later claimed pending matters remained. No wave of new indictments matching the scale of those claims has materialized in the public record as of the hearing. The February exchange did not resolve the tension. It illuminated it. One side sees a Justice Department that talked tough on transparency, delivered millions of pages, and then refused to be distracted from governing successes while Democrats ignored the same files for years. The other side sees selective enforcement, protective redaction,